I walk with a slight bounce that used to be affected, but which is now natural. I want to thank my publisher, Chatto Windus, and especially I want to thank Farisa Ibrahimi, my editor, whose mother calls Chatto Windus Chateau and Windows. Thank you very much for the chateau in which this book rests. And thank you, all of you here in this room, as well as those in the ether, for being here to listen to all of us and share this moment of communality, which is, I think, one of my favorite ways to experience poetry. I'm going to read a poem which is about the place I was born, Zambia, and its title is Nyami Nyami, which is the name for a Zambian river god belonging to the Tonga tribe of people. In a country named for its river, where the river is wide and its flow gives life to those who live on its banks, in a valley where people in the river lived in accord for generations, woven as hair in a braid is woven. In such a place our story begins, half a lifetime ago before the Moncton Commission, when people burned their chatupas in front of the offices of district commissioners, before a blood condition passed through the populace as flame through forest, before load shedding, hours of power cuts, the national grid sold off to the highest bidder, before Z was booming from copper, its roads full of American cars, and salesmen plied their trade with sweet nothings, weaving through traffic to make their entreaties. My friend, you must hurry up and catch this Mustang before it gallops away. Before potholes and roads unfinished through lack of investment, before imported knockoffs, before the goods trains and trucks, before the valley was connected by the orderly topography of macadam, and the valley's foot-worn pathways, taught to the valley's young by experience, were paved. The valley people lived in a relative peace. Livingston was by then long dead, and the people were free to bide after their own fashion, giving honor to the god of the river, and in return for their supplication, receiving blessings in the form of fish, so plentiful that to a child who did not like fish, a parent would say, "My darling, here there is fish," or "there is fish," and the child would remember the legacy knitted into the songs they had known all their lives of fisher folk who swam before they could walk or talk because the river god would never let them sink. This podium is loud. You make any move, and it's amplified for the ages. This is a poem called Heirlooms. The stein with a chipped edge you're sure you bought for £1 in Camden belonged, if you ask me, as well you might, to my mother, known all her life by a name she detested. What does it mean to answer to a misnomer, to feel the cold air between being and being seen? We have filled our house with her things. Alfred Meakin dinner set, cutlery etched with the indicia of the Newcastle Corporation, made in Sheffield by Firth Steelworks, a white drop leaf, crystalline glassware, a house-proud woman's cachet. I live in an artist's impression of the flat in Wandsworth. I cut vegetables with the knife my mother reached for in rage. I remember the sound of metal scraping wood, the door I had just grown strong enough to hold closed. I wanted to read this poem, and perhaps I'll read just one more after it. This is a poem which is called Blues. And it's Blues for Albert Prodigy Johnson and Carl Hasty Samuel, which are two MCs I grew up with. One of my principal poetic forms is rap. That's one of the ones that made me interested in poetry in the first place. And we were talking before everything began about beatboxing, and I feel like in London you're never more than 20 meters away from a beatboxer. But I'll spare you the instrumentation, which will have to be implied. Blues for Albert Prodigy Johnson and Carl Hasty Samuel. Another scribe of black trauma has passed from this life into the spirit world or nothingness, depending on how much store you set by Nietzsche. Apt that the arch laureate of nihilism comes to mind when I think of Prodigy, old before his time as I was old before mine. We passed a zoot, rolled with torquedor finesse round a circle embarking before it had a health spa. One of our number was confined these times to his room by shame, a death of some kind, because lying under a sky pockmarked with stars, he asked his girlfriend why she was so quiet. When Hasty walked or fell in front of the lorry, did he pass away if I can still hear him going back to back with K-Star and raps? If I think of him standing shoulder to shoulder with Prodigy in a circle of dead MCs, screwing up his face singing, "Listen up, I'm so raw. You know, I'm MC Hasty and I'm on tour. When I spit my lyrics, they all shout more. And when I give you more, the people them will be so sore." In the year of our Lord, 2003, Tox was still passing himself off as Little Dizzy, though Tox was, by then, closer in height to Jamackabee. After Lord of the Mics dropped, the gas was such, it just took a younger bussing a half-decent beatbox for the clash to start. Everyone played their part, from the hype men spitting lines back like a space echo to those standing just outside the cipher, but close enough to cuss the vanquished when a space opened for them to walk in the unforgiving light of mediocrity. This was before anyone in our circle had been stabbed or shifted. Some had shouldered a wooden box, but none of us understood the cost of the shanks and skengs in our lyrics. If we knew these days as halcyon is hard to say. The mind is some next ends. We wouldn't have been caught dead slipping, convinced as we were, the patch of grass beside the golden fish was big enough to constitute a world. So I'll read this poem to finish. Thank you for listening so attentively this evening. This is called Interior with Ceiling Fan. Wish that we could lie here for the rest of our lives, the blades of the fan above us whirling like a tangera's skirt, everything outside this room a distant country. Let me be this unguarded always, speaking without need of words, because breath is the oldest language any of us know. Thank you.